Yo, what is up everybody, it's Jelly Great here and welcome back to another Naruto reaction video here today. And today we got yet another classic explaining video with the great Swagkage, and as you can tell today's title we have Explaining Genjutsu. So folks, Genjutsu is quite a broad term because as most of you know, there are three main categories of jutsu types within the Naruto verse: Ninjutsu, Taijutsu, Genjutsu. So Genjutsu is a broad term. And there is a spectrum of Genjutsu. Right at the bottom of the spectrum, we'd have the weaker Genjutsu, such as the more subtle ones that Sharingan users like to use. And at the top of the spectrum, we'd have some of the most powerful Genjutsus in all of Naruto. Talking to Tsukuyomi, the Kodomatsukami, and of course, the most powerful Genjutsu in all of Naruto, the Infinite Tsukuyomi. So I'm sure Swag is going to be discussing this category of Genjutsu, breaking down what a Genjutsu exactly is. And I'm intrigued to see how he gives examples and explains how there are very different Genjutsus within a Naruto verse, right? Such as Itachi's finger pointing Genjutsu. It's quite intriguing. So I'm very interested to see how Swag explains Genjutsu in general and how he breaks it down. But before we begin, anyways, really appreciate it. Hit that like button, turn on bell notifications to stay updated with yours truly. And if you're new and you enjoy, man, and you mess with the kid, make sure to hit that sub button, because once you do, become part of the family forever. But let's not waste any more time. Screen. Let's see what Swag says today.
What's poppin', everybody? Swagkage here, and welcome to today's video, where we're going to be talking about Genjutsu, which literally translates to illusionary techniques. Genjutsu is one of three different categories used to organize different techniques into groups based on the three main ways that chakra can be applied in combat. While Taijutsu focuses strictly on physical combat, and Ninjutsu focuses on giving chakra physical form, Genjutsu focuses on applying chakra's ability to tamper with the mind. As you can probably infer based on what its name means, Genjutsu involves the use of illusions. Not the Harry Houdini or a card trick kind of optical illusion, but actual real hallucinations and things of that nature. In summary, the purpose of a Genjutsu is to either make a person perceive an object that isn't actually there, or make them perceive an event that isn't actually happening. Of course, this can't be accomplished by just messing with a person's vision. For a Genjutsu to work effectively, it needs to trick all five of a person's senses at once. And when in the hands of a skilled user, this is what pretty much all Genjutsu aim to do. This is accomplished by altering chakra flow in the target's body. More specifically, altering the way chakra flows to the brain and to the rest of the cerebral nervous system. Since this is the part of the body that controls the five senses, tampering with it forces people to perceive things that they shouldn't. Yin release is also integral to the effectiveness of Genjutsu, as it's what all Genjutsu draw from, though to what extent is never explained. All that's known about the correlation between yin release and Genjutsu is what the second Mizukage said about it, which is that he is a yin element, or in other words, has an affinity for yin release, meaning that he has an affinity for using Genjutsu. Nothing further than that is stated. However, with that in mind, we can make a few assumptions. The first and most obvious is that yin release and Genjutsu are heavily correlated. It's possible to have an affinity for yin release, and those with one have an affinity for using Genjutsu. Furthermore, since yin release governs the spirit and imagination, I imagine that it plays a role in helping to create the illusions that people perceive. I don't think that using chakra to disrupt the signal sent to the brain is enough to create some of the vivid illusions born through Genjutsu, and since yin release is stated to have a whole lot of properties that complement Genjutsu, like being able to create form out of nothing, governing the spirit and the mind, and that sort of thing, I do think that yin release is at least partially used to create some of the things that people witness while under the effects of Genjutsu. Bear in mind that that's just a hypothesis and has never been stated anywhere, but it does make a decent amount of sense, so I did think it was worth mentioning. Anyhow, in terms of applications, the class of Genjutsu has just as wide and varied of a spectrum as the classes of Ninjutsu and Taijutsu do. That might sound like a bold claim to make, but it's an accurate one. Just like with Ninjutsu and Taijutsu, there are Genjutsu that fall under various different ranks, D, C, B, A, and S, all of which differ immensely from one another. As you can probably tell for yourself, since there are D-rank Genjutsu and S-rank Genjutsu, Genjutsu can have a wide variety of scale and effects, both of which depend on the user of the technique, the circumstances, the amount of chakra poured into the technique, and the intended outcome of using the Genjutsu. However, all of that said, Genjutsu do tend to have a specific set of applications that differ from those of Ninjutsu and Taijutsu. The best way I can think of to describe it is, imagine Taijutsu as the warrior class in an RPG, Ninjutsu as the mage class in an RPG, and Genjutsu as the rogue class in an RPG. Genjutsu are typically used in missions emphasizing stealth, and frequently take an unorthodox or indirect approach to solving a problem. There are far too many Genjutsu for me to list all of the notable ones, and even far too many categories of them for me to list all of the notable categories of Genjutsu. But I will provide some examples of Genjutsu to give you an idea of what they are typically used for and how varied they can tend to be. At their lowest level, Genjutsu are typically used for the sake of creating a small-scale distraction or misleading somebody in a very subtle way. The best example of this is when Sasuke used the generic Sharingan Genjutsu to trick Danzo into thinking he had more remaining time left for Izanagi than he actually did, by placing Danzo under a Genjutsu where the eyes implanted in his arms were still open. These kinds of Genjutsu typically only affect one or two senses, and are most often used to mislead an enemy to get them to make a critical mistake in combat. Itachi did the same thing to Deidara when he recruited him to join the Akatsuki by making Deidara think that his explosive clay was somewhere other than where it actually was, which nearly led to Deidara blowing himself up, and I'm sure there are plenty of other examples throughout the manga of this kind of Genjutsu being employed. This same kind of Genjutsu, with the same kind of intent, meant to mislead an enemy, can be used at a higher level, and has been shown to many times by Itachi Uchiha. Itachi has managed to affect all 5 senses at once, and convince targets that they were fighting him when he was actually nowhere to be seen, and he even managed to place Sasuke under a Genjutsu where Sasuke was convinced that he just had his eye ripped out. This is probably the pinnacle of this kind of Genjutsu, because Sasuke was convinced that it was actually happening for a while. He must have been able to smell the blood coming out of his eye socket, his vision had to be cut in half, he had to be able to feel Itachi ripping his eye out.
That's why Itachi is always named the god of Genjutsu.
So this is an example of Itachi manipulating 4 out of Sasuke's 5 senses with incredible precision. Another form of Genjutsu that's less frequently employed involves the user controlling their target, albeit pretty subtly. The best example of this was when Kakashi used his Sharingan's Genjutsu to subtly coerce Zabuza into weaving hand seals at his command. This led Zabuza to believe that Kakashi could read his mind and see the future, and really threw Zabuza off, leading to him losing the entire battle. The highest level of this kind of Genjutsu is Shisui Uchiha's Mangekyo Sharingan ability, Kodo Amatsu Kami, which, I mean, like, it just gives a person complete control over somebody else, and they have absolutely no idea that they're being controlled the entire time. This Genjutsu was powerful enough to break Itachi free of Kabuto's control when he was revived through Edo Tensei. So yeah, it's no joke, it's really strong. The most frequently employed kind of Genjutsu involves manipulating all of a person's senses at once, and is generally really obviously fake. These kinds of Genjutsu are transparent about the fact that they're Genjutsu, and don't aim to mislead or control anybody, just to inflict so much mental trauma that it causes actual physical pain. These are typically the most frequently employed because of the fact that they require the least amount of precision and subtlety to use, and are just full-blown cerebral assaults against another person. Taiyuya's flute-based Genjutsu is an example of this, though one of the most powerful examples of this kind of Genjutsu is Tsukuyomi, which was strong enough to leave Kakashi hospitalized for, well, I mean, he had to stay in the hospital until Tsunade arrived in the village. The only reason he was able to wake up at all is because Tsunade is a medical expert. Tsukuyomi is, along with Kodo Amatsu Kami, hailed as one of the strongest Genjutsu because of its ability to manipulate the target's perception of time. Kakashi spent 3 days inside of the Genjutsu, though these 3 days were dragged out extensively by Itachi, as Itachi has full control over the passing of time in the world of Tsukuyomi. The thing is, it didn't actually last for 3 days. It's really difficult to explain, but on the base layer of the Genjutsu you have it lasts for 72 hours. Then on the second level of the Genjutsu, you have the fact that Itachi can control how long it takes for these 72 hours to pass. Then on the third level of the Genjutsu, these 3 days actually pass in less than a second in real life. It is the most ridiculous thing ever. Of course, the most powerful Genjutsu of all are Izanami, Izanagi, and the Infinite Tsukuyomi, but I'll explain those in a separate video because they're complex enough as it is. But yeah, for now, I'm pretty sure you guys all understand the basics of how Genjutsu work. The last 2 things I need to talk about are how Genjutsu are countered and how commonly Genjutsu is seen in the Naruto world. First, I'll talk about the frequency of its use, since that's the easiest to cover. Genjutsu isn't frequently employed by too many shinobi in the Naruto world, at least not when compared to ninjutsu and taijutsu. Genjutsu specialists are pretty rare, to say the least, and this is likely due to many things. Agree. Not only is there approximately a 1 in 7 chance of being born with an affinity for yin relief, furthermore, I assume controlling Genjutsu is very difficult. Not even Jiraiya's good with Genjutsu, so I mean, you know. On top of that, Genjutsu don't have too many direct combat applications, and are typically used as support jutsu. Genjutsu rarely ever do any noteworthy physical damage, so most people prefer to stick with ninjutsu and taijutsu. The only known counters to Genjutsu are the Sharingan, which is capable of breaking through most Genjutsu, even other Sharingan-induced Genjutsu, the disruption of the target's chakra flow, which can be induced either by the target themselves or by somebody else, and this is how many Jinchuriki are able to escape from Genjutsu almost immediately, as their tailed beasts supply them with enough chakra to at least temporarily disrupt the flow of it within their body. Jutsu with the primary goal of obstructing vision also reduce the effectiveness of ocular Genjutsu, and pain from the real world, as in pain not caused by the Genjutsu itself, can be used to break free of a Genjutsu as well. Anyway, I think that about covers everything there is to say about Genjutsu, though if you do have any unanswered questions about it, leave them in the comments below, and I'll definitely make sure to answer them. But assuming I am done with everything Genjutsu related, this is where I'm going to end the video. So as always, thank you guys for watching the video all the way to the end. If you're new here, make sure to subscribe and hit the like button if you enjoyed the video. If you really love me, make sure to check the description for the links to my Twitter and Patreon account. If you have any ideas for future video topics you want me to cover, leave them in the comments below, along with any questions you may have. And yeah, until then, I'll talk to you later. Till next time, Swagkage out. Bye.
There you guys have it. That was explaining Genjutsu by Swagkage. I definitely want to give my 2 cents on this. Right, so Genjutsu is, again, a very broad term, right? It is a category of the 3 main jutsus used within the Naruto verse in its entirety. And there are many, many Genjutsu out there, probably some that we don't even know of, right? Now, Genjutsu specialists are rare to come by. I do agree with that, right? And most of the time, Genjutsu is used more as a support tactic or support asset. And only the stronger Genjutsu are used in an offensive manner, such as when Itachi's in battle, right? His is so potent and efficient that he really doesn't have to do much physically speaking, right? He just looks at you, and you're dead. Basically, that's how simple it is for him in most interactions with most shinobi. So, Genjutsu, in a general sense, is probably the least useful jutsu of all 3, right? Because there aren't very many shinobi with elite Genjutsu. Elite Genjutsu. I'm talking Itachi, Shisui, even Obito, if you see the feat he had when he had Yagura under his control. So it isn't very common to see Genjutsu used heavily within a Naruto verse, and that is why we barely see it at all besides Uchihas, of course, right, who have the Sharingan, which is their specialty. It's within their very DNA. So yes, that's why I would claim that Genjutsu is probably the least useful out of the 3 in general, right? If you're Itachi Uchiha, I mean, clearly it's very useful. But in a general sense, on a balance of probabilities, someone with ninjutsu or taijutsu would probably be more efficient in battle. On a balance of probabilities, right? Because keep in mind, Itachi, Shisui are very, very rare in elite shinobi, right? We just happen to get a glimpse of them more often because they're pivotal characters in the Naruto timeline. But within the shinobi verse in its entirety, Genjutsu is probably one of the least useful on a balance of probabilities. But I like how Swag broke it down. He gave a very concise and clear-cut definition of Genjutsu, explained the variations of the Genjutsus, right? We have audio-based, such as Jiraiya's. Of course, we have visual-based, such with Uchiha members. And there are some that are so powerful that it will distort all 5 senses, such as the one that Itachi did, which Swagkage pointed out against Sasuke. He literally had him believing that he took his eye. That means he had to have manipulated his vision, his smell, his touch, at least, which is ridiculously impressive. Itachi is one of the most potent and elite Genjutsu users of all time, quite possibly the best, right? His Tsukuyomi might not be as powerful as the infinite Tsukunome, right? But the amount of control that he has over you once you're caught is immense. He literally has your entire existence in the palm of his hand. He can manipulate time. He can manipulate the amount of pain you're in. He can manipulate what you see, what you feel, everything. He's literally God once you're caught in his Genjutsu. Right? Reality distorts to his will. Your reality distorts to his will. So if he wants to make you suffer, he can make you suffer like he did Kakashi. Right? He made him suffer just enough to let him live. Sasuke, he made him think he took his eye. Deidara, he made him think that he had one on him, which broke Deidara to some extent. It gave him a deep disdain and hate for the Uchiha clan at large. He hates the Uchiha. He hated them so much he was willing to die to kill another one, Sasuke Uchiha. That's how much he hated him, because Itachi used his elite Genjutsu in a very disrespectful manner, to be quite honest. Imagine having clay bombs as your specialty, and a man almost makes you blow yourself up with the very specialty that you are so prideful of. It's quite disrespectful. This speaks volumes to the type of Genjutsu user Itachi Uchiha is. He probably is the best in my opinion, right? The best at using it. He makes people think that they're fighting him when in reality he isn't even there. The Tsukuyomi, etc. I can go on and on about Itachi. Right now, the Kodomatsukami is another one that is ridiculous. You're literally under someone's will without even knowing it. You're not even aware that you're in it. It's ridiculous. It's a ridiculous ability. So Shisui is a very, very elite Genjutsu specialist himself. And of course you have others, such as Jiraiya's against Pain, and Taiyuya's against Shikamaru. And of course the War Arc Infinite Tsukuyomi, which is the strongest, which literally puts you in a dreamlike state. So yeah, guys, I really enjoyed this video. It's interesting to go down this path. Genjutsu is very, very intriguing. It does some of the most crazy things within the Naruto timeline and the Naruto verse in its entirety. So let me know your thoughts on Genjutsu. What are some of your favorite Genjutsus? Is it your favorite type of jutsu out of the main three, etc.? I'm always interested to hear your thoughts, so please let me know in the comments section below. Of course, let me know of any recommendations you may have as well. And that's going to wrap it up, folks, and I'll catch you in the next video. Jittery signing out. Peace.